Here.
Vander? Vander is not here. Edward
Here.
and Vanessa. Vanessa is not here. On both committees, we have a quorum.
Okay, great. Thank you. We will call the meetings to order with quorum on both sides. Next item is just, told I can do this part, because I'm supposedly running the show. Missoula County acknowledges that this event takes place on the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Hospital people. And then on to the minutes, approval of minutes. I guess I'll do OSAC and then Patrick from the OLC. Everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes. OSAC, any revisions needed? All right, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I move we approve the minutes. Second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. You wanna?
Great. So OLC meeting from last month. Everybody had a chance to read the minutes? Mark, Corey?
Yes,
Everybody here? Anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion, we approve minutes of the May meeting.
Thank you, Ron. Is there a second?
Second.
Got that, Bruce? Second, Bruce? Okay, we have a motion. Any discussion on the minutes? Corrections, alterations, edits, throw them out, adopt them?
Did we miss anybody on the attendance part? Cause it just seemed like there were like 5 people. And it seemed like we had more people than that.
I looked
It
and
was executive committee. I thought the same thing.
Oh,
I
that was
looked
the
at that.
executive
Yeah, I
committee?
think that was.
My bad.
Subcommittee,
Okay.
I think they were right, sure.
yeah.
Okay, all in favor of approval of last month's minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed, minutes are approved. Thank you. All right,
And I think I skipped one thing. The OLC committee approves the agenda, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. You want to leave that section?
you do that. So tonight's agenda, you see it in front of you. Any suggestions, alterations, or a motion to approve the agenda as proposed?
Make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Ron? Sharon,
Second.
second. Any comments, Corey, Mark, others? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Agenda's approved. A lot of comments and announcements.
Yeah, moving right along. Is there any public or guest comments on items that are not on the agenda? And I'm just gonna make a caveat there that we will have an additional period for public comment after the presentation for the main agenda item. So this public comment period is just for items not on the agenda. And for people online, be sure to raise your hand if you have a comment. That's our only way to see you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Okay. So far this is going pretty smooth.
So from here on, Eric is going to run the meeting, but I'll be trying to keep track of folks who want to ask questions or make comments. And as Eric mentioned, if you're online, use the little raise your hand so I can make sure that I see you. Do the same here, just make sure you get my attention. So if Eric doesn't call on you, it's my fault, not his. So let me know. All right, it's all yours.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I just want to hit on that one more time. I know probably both committees normally do things pretty informally in discussion. Because we have a lot of people in the room, both with committee members and public. We want to try to be a little bit more formal and go through the chair for your comments and make sure, we want to make sure everybody has a chance to make their comment. And after the presentation, the way it's going to work is we're going to have some comments and discussion period for the committees. And then we're going to move and ask the public and ask, see if they have comments or discussion. So with that, I am going to turn the meeting over to Kaylee and Zach to do a presentation on Marshall Mountain. Level 2.
Sorry, just like walking around in my really loud shoes. So, welcome, everyone. It's really good to see everybody and have all of you in the same room. We haven't done a joint meeting in a really long time. So I'm Kaylee Becker. I am the Missoula County Open Lands Project Manager. And I will be giving the presentation today along with Zach Covington, the city's Open Space Program Manager. So let me get this presentation up and sharing the screen. Give me just a second. I'm always really bad at doing this while multitasking. So, hey, here we go. Awesome. Okay. So as it was already mentioned, the purpose for today's meeting is to get more information, delve a little bit deeper into this project and have questions and answers. No action. There'll be the vote recommendation scheduled for the next meeting. So this is a joint project between the city and county, and it is a request for open space bond funding to support the acquisition of 480 acres in Marshall Canyon. Here. So first, Zach and I will be giving this presentation jointly, so we'll switch back and forth a little bit here. First, we're just gonna go over some of just kind of locating all of us to the project, where it is, go over some project details, and then we'll dive into like conservation values. So first off, I know we all know where Marshall Mountain is in our mind. We have a picture of what it looks like, but I don't think we always have the opportunity to really zoom out of it and understand where this project is in the context of the greater landscape. So I think these maps are really useful to kind of help understand that these 3 parcels, the 480 acres, are in this network across the landscape connected to these public lands identified here through the Lolo National Forest in green, state land in blue, and that brighter green, the city open space, but then also private land conservation through the conservation easements. And then one thing that doesn't show up on this map, which you can't see the cursor, is this area all through here. A lot of that is the Nature Conservancy property, so that is also private land that's conserved. And I think this really paints that picture of where it is in a regional context that has this connectivity both north and south to protected landscapes and really intact wildlands that have been the focus of a lot of different conservation efforts over the years. And then I think the other, so in terms of the importance of this project, it's highlighted through this context, but also in terms of the important natural resources, which we'll talk more about later, as well as the community connection to this place and the long history of human use. And I think you all saw those letters of support. The number is one thing, but I think what really was stood out to me in those letters of support is also that breadth of the types of organizations, agencies, community groups of all sorts. I think that really speaks to this connection the community has to this project. So in terms of project context, I want to highlight, zooming in a little bit more, that again, we all know this, but the 480 acres is divided into these 3 160-acre parcels that all have separate ownership. And as we told this story before at the last few meetings, that came about because each landowner had this opportunity to step in and purchase a property to conserve it for this future community outcome. And it was just a really timely effort on each landowner's part. And while I don't want to go into a ton of the background, it's all really interesting. I do want to highlight a few pieces of each parcel. So as many of us know, those 2 on the southern end, the Izzy Dog and Five Valleys Land Trust, those were part of that former Marshall Mountain ski area. And the skiing uses actually went back much farther than the commercial ski area. First to highlight this Five Valleys Land Trust parcel, It was actually industrial timberland owned by a number of companies throughout the sixties and then ended up being Plum Creek Timberlands. And that property was purchased by the Nature Conservancy as part of the Montana Legacy Project. As many of you know, that's a project where the landscape scale of PNC bought hundreds of thousands of acres of former industrial timberlands. Many of those lands, especially around this area, ended up going to the Forest Service. This one in particular was held back from that transfer to the Forest Service, and it was instead transferred to Five Valleys Land Trust. And I want to note that because part of the intention there was knowing this is a special piece that has a special connection to the community, and we want to make sure that a local organization has an opportunity to be part of that conversation of what's going to happen to that parcel. And then the Itsy Dog parcel, that was purchased by a group of local philanthropists in 2021 when that property was up for sale. And then the Conservation Fund property that was purchased in just April of 2023. That's a pretty recent purchase there. And so I think the last thing to highlight for this slide before I move on is just that I've talked about that connection to the community and the long history of human use. That goes from early tribal indigenous peoples use and then through those changing uses over time to recreation, ski uses, youth programming, trail running, community events. So it's really morphed throughout the years, but it's always held this theme of community, places, and inclusivity and natural resource conservation. So moving on, I'm going to hand it over to Zach to talk about some of the open space fund.
Hey, thanks, Kaylee. I think as many of you know, this request for open space bond funding really is to support a simple acquisition of the 480 acres. This is a partnership with the city and the county. The county is the proposed owner and manager of the properties with support from the city. And so this really just kind of documents how this project meets open space bond purposes and goals, conserving and enjoying and enhancing open space, providing public access to water and land, conserving agriculture and agricultural land, fish and wildlife habitat, rivers, lakes, and streams, agriculture in the sense of the forest element. Providing open space, things, landscapes, and trails, managing the growth, and making improvements to lands acquired or designated as open space. As far as the 2019 Missoula Urban Area Open Space Plan goes, you can see the check marks there. I think one of our check marks got deleted on Parkland Developed Parks. This is kind of an interesting hybrid project, particularly with the public access at the bottom of the site. And that's something that can be discussed a little bit later, but we wanted to showcase the conservation values that are being illustrated here. Likewise, we always look at whether or not these projects fit within cornerstones identified in the 2019 Missoula Urban Area Open Space Plan. And so the kind of green area there is one of those. It's the Mount Jumbo Marshall Canyon cornerstone. And this is the cornerstone that I believe it was in the older plan, the previous version of the plan, and it's in this 2019 version as well. I also wanted to point out the fact that this project is bordering on the county's planning boundary. Missoula Planning Region and Potomac, how do you say that? Potomac, sorry, Potomac. I'm kind of green in the area, so I apologize. Potomac Green Oak Planning Region. So the fact that it's kind of between this city and county planning boundaries is really unique, and that's why we are coordinating as a city and county to try to work on these types of projects. Something we also try to do is look at how the project fits within state, county, and local plans, ordinances, and policies. And so I won't go into a lot of detail here, but But moving left to right, you can see the check marks. We already went over the open space plan. Conservation values included in the plan. You can see those check marks. The next one over is in the city ordinances, 12.56, the types of conservation lands that we look at related to open space fund use. Conservation lands, parkland, trails, greenways, views and vistas, and riparian lands. Next to that is the values. In the middle there is the values included in the city ordinance of aesthetics, scenic, recreational, historic, and ecological values. And then moving over to the right a little bit, state MCA, that's Montana Code annotated. And those are open space values that are included in state code. And then the right column there is the strategic goals of the city as documented or recorded in 2022. And how the project also meets the goals of the city. Back over.
So you don't get sick just hearing one of us. So I'm gonna take the next few slides talking about some of the conservation, open space, and resource values. So first, I know I mentioned this just a little earlier when I was talking more broadly about the project and this history of human use. You know, one of the reasons this area is, and that's one of the reasons it's been identified as important due to its community connection and this cultural significance. So the Salish, Pend Oreille, and Kootenai tribes established trails throughout the valley for hunting and a variety of purposes. And along those trails, there are signified these traditional place names across the Missoula Valley. And they often describe these features that were along the trails or the networks, which were shown in this map that was produced by the Cultural Committee at the CSKT. And as you can see, this red area right there, that has a traditional place name. I think it's called Has White Clay. It's the translation that's identified on the map there. And that is, indication that it's somewhere that was used and was significant to the tribes. And so related to this, we've talked from this project about this cultural importance and something the city and county are really definitely dedicated to honoring that cultural significance and seeing where there are opportunities to really partner with the tribes here and across the county in all many aspects. So I did want to highlight that one thing that's been happening, as part of the project development is the county commission has had ongoing conversations with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. And most recently, the tribal council of this CSKT met with the Board of County Commissioners to talk specifically about Marshall Mountain and if there are opportunities here to partner and explore kind of how these two entities could work together. And the project received a lot of excitement from the tribal council. They were very supportive and really wanted to talk about how we can partner together. So those conversations are ongoing, but I think it's a really key thing to highlight here that we've got that partnership in the work, in progress. So another piece that I want to talk about is how this site has evolved over time. So the uses have continued and they've kind of shifted over time, but there's always been this kind of current that has run through it of inclusivity and really community involvement. So that dates back to even in the 1920s when this first started to be used as a ski area. And it was really just like a volunteer kind of, I think, local, maybe mountaineer group that started using it as that for backcountry skiing, but also would bring people together to teach them outdoor skills and teach them how to do backcountry skiing. And then even as it became a commercial operation, it was always very much reliant on volunteers and people from the community helping to run the lifts and clear the ski runs. And it was never like a super commercially viable ski resort. So it always really did rely on this kind of everybody getting together and this teamwork approach. And then when it did stop operating in 2003, public uses were definitely still allowed in more of a limited sense for some events and some more particular or some more, I think, just limited uses. But then when Izzy Dog and that group of people was able to purchase the property they were able to open it up as well as the Five Valleys Land Trust property in partnership with the city. And that's really when we saw this like larger public use of the property. And so since then, as you'd expect, the number of public uses has grown and has been able to include youth programming through a variety of partners that would include things like summer camps and day camps put on by Parks and Recreation, Missoula Parks and Recreation, organizations doing environmental education and recreation on the site, as well as national mountain biking races and backcountry horsemen group, as well as trail running and access to adjacent public lands for hunting and fishing. So that has really, as that use has grown, it's also grown in importance and become an even more vital piece of this puzzle across the kind of recreation landscape for the public. And I want to note here too, that data has definitely shown that these uses are from people across the county. So the school groups that are out there, they're not just Missoula city schools, they're schools from the broader area, as well as members of the public who are there recreating and participating in programs. They're coming from all over. So this slide, I think, also really highlights the opportunities that this property provides in terms of connection to this greater landscape. And obviously, as I was saying before, that goes towards these more regional kind of connectivity values, but also on a more site-specific level, it provides recreation opportunities as well. Because these three parcels really do act as a sort of an in-holding, being almost wholly surrounded by Forest Service property. And so this map shows in the highlighted green, those are the existing trails, and then those little dots are existing trailheads. And I think one thing, obviously, is that you see this Izzy Dog property. It's at the end of a public road, Marshall Canyon Road, and it ends on the Izzy Dog parcel. So that parcel really becomes the entrance and the access to all of this adjacent public land that is connected to this public road. And so without that, if that land wasn't open to the public, that connection would be cut off. So having it public allows that additional opportunity for people accessing, Wisher Ridge, Wood Mountain, even up towards the Rattlesnake, hunting, fishing, hiking, biking. I think that there are additional probably regional trail connections that this would provide. And then on top of that, I think the other important thing to note is that the uniqueness of the local government ownership of this piece, in that all those surrounding areas of Forest Service property, as well as the city open space, is really at capacity when we think about special use permits, which are required for any large event, any programming, anything like that. So at this point, capacity is a little bit capped due to those limits, which are in place for good reason. But there's also a huge demand. And if we want to have equitable access to these programs where it's not so competitive to sign up and it's easier to get into, we have to have higher numbers too. To have higher numbers, we also need more space. So I think this project can really speak to that additional space and spreading out some of the intense uses that we're seeing in adjacent areas like Blue Mountain and Patty Canyon and Mount Jumbo. And having additional trailheads and trails is a really important tool that land managers can use in order to disperse recreation a little bit more and ease the pressure on existing lands. Okay, I'll hold you for a second.
Hey, this is a reminder, we're covering this at a pretty high level, but we've included the actual level 2 application in your meeting materials. So I'd encourage you to go there for a lot of details as well. There's so much information. Kaylee and I had a hard time kind of whittling this down and doing a presentation, right? There's just so much to cover. So we wanted to show this kind of oblique angle of the site, just so you can kind of take a look at the topography a little bit and the vegetation. And we just wanted to emphasize through this that it's fairly seamlessly connected to public lands, the Forest Service lands around the outside of the property. It's not like one parcel is completely clear cut and the other one is forested, and it's all fairly seamlessly integrated into the landscape with the exception of the ski runs. And that's important to consider. There's been minimal forest management in recent years. The site contains a number of forest types and vegetation types. And then also this kind of provides a good view of this historic ski base area down here at the bottom. And that's fairly unique because it's quite level and it's where basically everyone accesses the site. And this is important for potential future uses as we think about accessibility and equity and the capability of the site to support various activities in the future. This is a map of various Forest Service treatments, forest treatments in particular around the site in the green and gray up on the right side. The land is located in the Marshall Woods Project area, which is about a 13,000 acre collaboratively developed Lola National Forest project. And there's been recent forest management projects on both public and private land. And there's opportunities here to partner with the Forest Service and the State Department of Natural Resources and Conservation on future forest management. And that's really critical for this site. And it's a benefit of having the site surrounded by those Forest Service lands. And that can help to increase forest health and habitat quality in the future.
Neat. Okay, so we're going to talk now a little bit about some of the additional resource values present on the property. So this map shows the identified wetland and riparian areas on the 3 parcels, as well as you can see Marshall Creek running through the Conservation Fund property and the Antigas property. So Marshall Creek and its tributaries on this property support over 50 acres of wetland and riparian habitat. And those areas are really important for a host of reasons. When we think about the riparian and wetland values and how they contribute to a functioning aquatic ecosystem in terms of aquatic habitat, water quality, water quantity. In addition to that, these areas are really, and I'll get into the wildlife habitat next, but riparian areas and wetlands are really key for wildlife habitat as well. When we think about forage, when we think about cover and connectivity, as they're often movement corridors for a variety of species. And I think a piece of this too, in thinking about that aquatic habitat, is that this Marshall Creek drainage is really pretty unique in that it supports an incredibly productive west slope cutthroat trout fishery. And this is actually a genetically pure strain of west slope cutthroat trout, which is an identified species of concern by the state of Montana. And so this is a priority watershed to conserve, as it is actually so productive it could support more regional populations through moving fish, and it's definitely of interest to fish, wildlife, and parks for maintaining the quality of that species. And there are opportunities on the property to restore some of these wetland and riparian areas that may have been impacted by growth or weeds. And both Trout Unlimited and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has already been in conversations with the city and county about opportunities for restoration, and also where they can supply or potentially partner to support through technical and through financial assistance. So I think those are really exciting restoration opportunities on site to really improve the habitat of what's already there. And so next, getting into wildlife habitat, as Zach showed through that map that really had the good kind of terrain and forest cover view. This site is really topographically diverse. And what that means is there's a variety of habitat types within it. And so the site does support a number of species. There are over 13 threatened and endangered species, as well as species of concern identified by the state of Montana that have ranges in this area. That includes the northern alligator lizard, Canada lynx, grizzly bear, flammulated owl, Clark's nutcracker, and a number of other species. In particular, thinking about flammulated owl, there is a portion of the property on the Izzy Dog parcel that is up, what would that be? Opposite the base area. I'm not locating.
West.
Thank you, west.
Northwest.
Thank you. West of the creek on the Izzy Dog parcel that's actually connected to this flammulated owl habitat that's been identified by the Forest Service as a particular protection. And that continues on to the Marshall Creek, the Marshall Mountain project. And then there are also a number of habitat trees that have been identified throughout the property that are important for bird species. As I mentioned, Westlope cutthroat trout is another one that does have really important aquatic habitat on this site. And then if we think about the more regional connectivity of these, while it might not have like the core grizzly bear habitat on site, these are still really important connections in that they are close to core habitat. So we think about large carnivores that need to move across the landscape. Areas like this are really key with that because as you're traveling down Marshall Canyon and along the creek, there's all that riparian habitat, but then also there are opportunities where these large carnivores can move across the river and down and connect to the Sapphire Range in that area. So it really is part of this network, as I mentioned before, of those protected lands that connect these really intact wildlands that support an incredible number of species. And that being said, just one more thing about it. While we really, I think about that north-south connection a lot because of the placement of the property, it really does provide a lot of east-west connectivity as well. When we think about all the conservation of Mount Jumbo and the recreation area up the Rattlesnake and the wilderness, and then moving over towards the Blackfoot. So it really is on the edge of like, I think it's not within, but it's on the edge of like a tier 1 conservation area as identified by the State Wildlife Action Plan. And within this network of lands that have been a focus in Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative and the southwest part of the continent. So really more landscape level conservation efforts. Okay, so we're gonna shift gears and going over all of these values about the property, why it's important, what's there. And we're gonna talk about numbers. So diving into budgets. First, I want to go over just the general project budget. So this is what is represented in these two tables of the project costs. So at the top, we have in the blue table, project costs that are associated with the actual acquisition of the land. And I'll go over the red one next. It's a bit of a breakout, like a subset of what are these other items. So for estimated land value, we've got 3.2 million. I want to be really clear here that the 3.2 million, that's not based on, we don't have a final appraisal yet. We would do that much closer to closing. These are estimates. I think they're good estimates, but they are estimates. So those numbers could change slightly. And I will have to look at my notes to remember exactly the breakdown. It is, oh, thanks, I've got it there too. Thank you. Oh, perfect. That's what I was looking for. So the Izzy Dog parcel is estimated to be about a value of 2.3 million. The Five Valleys Land Trust parcel is estimated at around 500,000. And then the Conservation Fund property at around 400,000 for a total of 3.2 million. And then the other items, the phase 1 and 2 EA, that's going to be about $50,000. We've got appraisals. The appraisal number might be higher than you're used to seeing, and I just want to call that out. We can get into this more, but it's because of a special type of appraisal we might need that is more expensive. Closing fees, legal fees, costs to open the site to the public. So I will go over that more in detail. But as you can see, total project costs are estimated at $3,882,000. So I want to go a little bit more in detail with those costs to open the site to the public. So the site is being used by the public right now. But if it comes under public ownership, there are a number of things that have to happen to reduce liability, but also when something is owned by the county or the city, we also have to bring it up to code. So we have all these requirements we're gonna have to comply with. And that's what some of this, all of this really speaks to. In addition to accessibility, when we open it to the public, we're not just opening it to some of the public, we're opening it to all of the public. So we also need to accommodate for accessibility to key parts of the site. And that's what these project costs include. So building demolition, site clearing. Again, there are some buildings on site that can't be rehabbed. Empty vacant buildings are not a great thing to just have sitting around. Water supply requirements, that's again that code compliance piece of if it's purchased, there's key things that we will just be required to do from day one to bring that water supply to a public drinking water kind of standard. Trail accessibility, that speaks to opening it to the more, the general public and having it be accessible. Base building code compliance, again, it's kind of self-explanatory. Trailhead signs and pit toilets. I want to be really clear that the reason that is on there is that we'll be opening the site up to the public and probably more public than we see now. And a key part of that is we need to conserve the natural resources that are on site. And so we need to direct the public to go where we want them to go. And that happens through good signage, through signs, pit toilets, self-explanatory, essential item. So that adds up to 600,000 for the project cost. Okay, this graphic is from the conceptual master plan that's under review right now and open for public comment. I won't go over it in detail, but I just think it's a good visualization for those of you who maybe haven't been to the area a lot to just understand, like, what is that infrastructure on site that has to be removed, taken down, adjusted. And when I talk about accessibility, that base area loop trail is part of that, as well as some other connections. So that kind of helps give you a visual of what we're talking about with cleanup. Okay. So project budget. So this is where we're going over proposed project funding. So the top one, the U.S. Community Forest Program, is one we have applied for $600,000. We should hear about that in July, so it's still pending. Estimated in-kind contribution from landowners. I want to go into depth a little bit more on this one. So the reason is that we have in-kind contributions coming from a couple different landowners. So I just want to break out what that actually looks like. The estimate again is an in-kind contribution of $450,000 from Izzy Dog and $425,000 from Five Valleys Land Trust. And so that corresponds to a purchase price for Izzy Dog of $1,850,000 and then $75,000 from Five Valleys Land Trust. And why I want to be a little bit more clear about that is it pertains to how I said we don't have final appraisals yet. But I want to make it clear that even if the final appraised amounts are different than what we're estimating, because we have agreements with the landowners on the purchase price and two of them are a bargain sale, the appraisal difference would just affect the in-kind contribution. It wouldn't affect the in-cash need for purchasing the properties. So that's where that is kind of a key piece to understand that some of those numbers might fluctuate a bit, not changing the overall ask of like what we're trying to fundraise for that in-cash need. So the Montana Fish and Wildlife Conservation Trust, that's another one that we've applied for and we should hear back in July or so. Conservation Alliance, I think we won't hear until September. Environmental Protection Agency, that's committed, but I want to be clear that that is funding that is just allocated to those from the Brownfields program for the phase 1 and 2 environmental assessment. And then Friends of Missoula Parks, but also, or more accurately, Friends of Marshall Mountain, which is a kind of a subgroup of Friends of Missoula Parks. And they are a key partner that has been able to work with us, and they are really focused more on the or they are focused on fundraising for the project as well, and that's why we're seeing this contribution there. They'll be fundraising beyond just what we're looking at for the scope of this budget. That's just why I'm putting here. Well, we're interested in for the acquisition. So the open space bond, the request is for 1 million from the city and 1 million from the county. And again, I don't think we actually said this earlier. Apologies if we did, but I'm just going to say it again. The proposal for the project is, again, it's a joint project, so asks to both the city and county shares the open space bond. And the county is the proposed owner, would be the proposed owner and manager of the property with support from the city of Missoula. So it is a joint project in a variety of ways. For that open space bond request, how we are anticipating, if it was approved, that would be structured is it would basically close, if we're thinking about the two different bonds, the 2006 and the 2018 open space bond, we would probably then close out the 2006 bond, and then the rest would come from 2018, just so you understand where those requests come in terms of those two different bonds and how it would split. So that gets to the total anticipated funds, $3,882,000. That we are trying to raise. As you can see, we've been working hard to try to leverage this request for the open space bond. I wish we had final answers for the grant funds, but we can't control that timeline. I think just quick, the other thing I just want to mention, because I think it's important to keep in mind, is that we're asking a number of different entities for funding. Some of these funding sources are more restrictive than others. So there are particular ones that can only go towards acquisitions. Some are going to be more flexible. So I just want you to keep that in mind as you're thinking about these requests. Okay, I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to Beth. Yes. Yeah.
Make sure I don't miss any details. Okay, so we're just gonna go through the basic anticipated timeline. Not spring anymore, although Charles and I were talking about how it feels like spring still. But spring, summer this year, we're obviously doing this level 2 presentation right now. And we'll be having another meeting in July to talk about decision-making with OSAC and LLC on this. And there will be a recommended action item on the agenda for the July meeting. So I want you all to be prepared for that. We'll have regular updates as far as the county process goes. And I think, Kayla, you want to hop back in and talk about that second kind of chevron there?
Yeah, I just want to elaborate on that a little bit of what that looks like this summer and fall. There won't be any really large decision point at like a hearing that's happening this summer and fall. More what we're anticipating is there'll be periodic items that will come before the Missoula County Parks and Trails Board for discussion. And those discussions would largely relate to management operation models that would be proposed. And then there'll be periodic items that come before the Board of County Commissioners. They have every action they take is at a public meeting, typically these what we call administrative meetings. And so items will come up there periodically relating to due diligence items like purchase and sale agreements, contracts for legal services, things like that. So that's really what that looks like. It's just moving the ball forward little by little over the summer.
Okay, thank you. And I'll mention again, I think Eric already mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting, but the meeting in July where we'll be talking about making a vote, having an action, will be a joint meeting as well. And then in the fall, we plan to have a joint city-county public hearing. And so that's where a lot of the public can get involved, ask questions, make comments. So public will be allowed and encouraged to make comments throughout the entire process. We're providing a lot of opportunities for that. But in the fall is when the actual public hearing with city council and county commissioners will occur.
That would immediately precede the county and the city decision.
Correct. So I think on the city side, it's kind of standard to do a 2-week. So we decided 2-week public hearing. Yeah. And so that's what we're planning on. And the city council can make changes to that schedule if they decide to. If it's 2 weeks they don't think is long enough, they can extend it. They can modify that as needed.
I know there was some concern of completing the deal on behalf of Izzy Dog's outstanding ownership of the property that they're intending to sell. Has all that been worked out with Izzy Dog? I think they were hoping it would be closed earlier.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are working on those landowner agreements. And yeah, we do have a little bit more time. They've all been very generous with, letting us work through, giving us time to work through this public process. So yeah, we've got everybody on board to be able to have a timeline that extends out through the fall. And with that, speaking of landowners and others, I also just want to take the opportunity to make sure that, we just acknowledge that while Zach and I are presenting this project today, this opportunity has come about to the community, thanks to the landowners, the community organizations and committee members. Your time is very valuable, and we really thank you for taking the time to read all those materials and hear the presentations at the project. This has taken a team, and so thank you to everyone. And with that, we do have representatives from 2 of the landowner groups here today, and I would just like to give them each a brief amount of time to speak to, as landowners, how they see this project, what their goals are, right? It's important to them. So I think we've got Rick Wish Camper, and also Whitney Ben from Five Valleys, whoever wants to speak first.
Well, thanks, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak here and to frankly be a part of this project. Five Valley got involved in the Marshall Mountain project in 2014, when we had the opportunity to receive it from the Nature Conservancy as they were, moving out of ownership of a number of properties in the Marshall Woods area. This is a property that could have gone to the Forest Service, but because of the immense historical community value, community use on the landscape, the organization decided it was worth the chance, worth taking the risk to take ownership of this project, understanding that there was enthusiasm for a community outcome, there was will for a community outcome, there wasn't exactly a plan yet for a community outcome. And so it's been a pleasure to be at the table for the last 9 years as the community's come together to develop a plan to acquire this 480 acres. And what we've seen has been a treasure to watch as the community programming, youth programming, and broad use in the landscape continue to blossom. With anything else? What did I miss?
Nothing. We covered the bases. We're thrilled to be a part of this effort together, and it's indeed crossroads where we are now. And it's really exciting to be in the room with all of you in this joint effort between the county and the city. And I can't say enough kind things about Kaylee and Zach's presentation so far. So thank you.
Hey, everybody, my name is Rick Camper. I'm here representing Dizzy Dog LLC. My wife and I and another couple are the members of Dizzy Dog LLC, and they're not professional conservationists or planners or anything like that. We're just committed citizens in Missoula, and we love this place. And when Marshall came up for sale of the base area, and it looked like it might become a private residence, county got sad. We thought we'd get active if we could. We were really inspired by the camps that are run up there, particularly, going up there on a Tuesday afternoon, seeing all the parents and all the kiddos on their bikes and zooming around. It's just really heartwarming about the type of place that Missoula is and the type of place that Missoula will continue to be. So we were fortunate that we were able to purchase property and then talk to the city and to Five Valleys and put together, a project that would have been really great or could have been really great. And then conservation funds stepped in and worked out an opportunity to buy the Jacobs property, which is about other 160 acres. Now all of a sudden the scope of the project is really remarkable in terms of opportunities for recreational use, but also connectivity and wildlife, all the things that keep in the presentation. So we're super thrilled with the partnership with the city and the county. It's really exciting to see the county start to get involved in potential land ownership and management. And we just want to be as supportive as we can be to help continue to make this process inclusive and come out with great outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And with that, we can move to questions. And also to shout out Beastie Boys. They were on Marshall Mountain on their first tour, Licensed to Ill.
Can we get Mark and our other
Yeah.
folks on here so we can see if they have questions?
Yes, definitely.
It's not Mark, I'm pretty sure.
I know, right? They look a lot better.
Yeah, so we'll have a period here to give committee members a chance for questions and discussion they'd like to have. And then we feel like that's tailed off. We'll ask the public if they have questions or discussion items. And we have a vast knowledge about Marshall here. It's incredible to see all these people in the same room. So any question you have about Marshall, somebody in this room should be able to answer. And I think we'll just try to raise hands and I'll try to call on you. I don't think it'll be too hectic. So, we'll go first. Edward.
So a big question that obviously affects the budget is there's a lot of infrastructure on the site. And what to keep and what to get rid of is taking a lot of decision-making and investigation. Could you elaborate a little bit on, some things are gonna go away and some things are gonna stay, and how that affects the budget and the future management of the area?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for this particular focus of this open space bond request, a lot of those activities won't affect the request of how much funding we need to acquire the property. So I think the variability could come into play with those like roughly 5 or 6 items that we listed out for that site access and cleanup. Those are estimates. I think they're good estimates, but like those could fluctuate a little bit. That being said, we have a really incredible partner at the table with us, which is Foam, and they're dedicated to seeing those things move forward too. So I think that as those costs shift, it wouldn't affect the overall ask for the open space bond funding because we have this fundraising partner. So friends of Missoula or Marshall Mountain, sorry.
So just to elaborate on it a little bit, so what will be asked to advise, approve, recommend the city council will be the acquisition prices and not all these ancillary activities?
Absolutely. Yeah. So exactly what I showed in that budget, that is the 4 corners of that encompass everything that we are looking at in terms of the budget to just acquire the property. All those other costs that go beyond would be factored into larger parts of the conversation outside of the open space bond funding requests. Does that help?
Yeah, maybe it's not, yeah, because those will come probably from other sources. For example, the stewardship bond money, or not bond, but whatever that comes towards city parks and whatever county area. Those will be the sources for some of this other management costs.
Yeah, and I can't speak to what the particular sources would be for these costs that go beyond just what I piloted for the acquisition. It's a bit outside my realm. But that would be something that the larger partnership would be looking at, is what are those costs and how we can create them, and we have been having those conversations.
I just specify
Yeah.
too, we did have that other $600,000 in there for the basic health, safety and access items, correct? And so that is part of the budget from a health, safety and welfare, basic access and safety needs. And so that is in there. That's part of the
That is in there, that's in the request, and we'll vote on it, or?
right.
Yeah, that's part of the overall project budget that we proposed. As in addition, along with this open space bond request, is that 600,000 that just would get the.
There's $1 million from each county and city for your contribution to the whole thing. Is that? What does that $1 million go towards? Is it just the acquisition or all these other?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think what really comes into play there is it's hard to identify that like super precisely, because we in a sense have this matrix. Let's say we get all the grant funds that we apply for. We have this matrix of funding and all of them have separate restrictions. So some of those pieces, those funding sources absolutely could not be used to pay for the site access improvements. Some could. So basically, we've looked at all of these and we're like, yeah, between all of these, we can cover all of these separate costs. Does that make sense? So like, for example, the conservation fund, not the conservation fund, the community forest funding, if we get that, can only go towards site acquisition, land value transfer. Same with some of the other ones. On the other hand, you all know through the 2018 bond language and actually the 2006 bond language, both of those allow for using the funding to acquire land, but also to do these things that make it acceptable, that provide for those safety improvements. And that's not going to be true of other sources. So yeah, it's like this fabric we have to weave together.
Sharon, right?
Very good.
Okay.
Yes, so the $600,000 for the site opening, and I read through the conceptual master plan. It's all pretty well laid out in there. But on the conceptual master plan, there are more projects on there that say, let's do these right away before we open to the public than are on the list. Like getting rid of the ski tower and the chairlifts and, some parking stuff. I'm not exactly sure what that is. But I also think we should be doing some weed spraying up there right away, because once you get a gazillion people out there, it's gonna be difficult. The weeds are gonna move around even more so than they already. But it would be nice to see weed spraying on that list as well. But I wonder about the rest of the stuff that's in the conceptual master plan for do right now and isn't on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should mention there too, with that improve, the other piece I mentioned, I forgot to mention with that funding table and those site cleanup costs is obviously Friends of Marshall Mountain is a real key partner there too. So we have the ability to work with them and kind of figure out, you know, how much can they help cover that and get some assistance. So with the chairlift, I know we've talked about it. I think that one has gone back and forth a bit because we have some different estimates of some different ideas about, oh, maybe we can cover the cost through these other avenues. And so I think that is one that we just basically, it's complicated to say the least to take down a chairlift. And so we're still in the process of working through that understanding of like, oh my gosh, what is the best way to get this down? How can we do this in a cost-effective way? What are these other funding sources we can bring in outside of this to maybe cover it? So I think, yes, there's a possibility that that one, we end up needing some funding, but I think we have partners at the table who can also help with that. Does that help?
Yeah, I was just wondering why, it seemed like they made a big deal out of it in the conceptual master plan. And it didn't get carried over into the level 2.
Totally. And Juniper, if you have anything to add on that, because I know you've been more in those discussions, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, no, hi, everybody. I'm Juniper Davis. I'm the manager of Parks, Trails, and Open Lands for the county. I think Kaylee covered it pretty well. When you look at the conceptual master plan, there are improvements that are noted that are either immediate or essential or kind of longer term as opportunities arise. And what we're really eager to get to are those immediate improvements, some of which Kaylee identified in her presentation and would be able to be covered in that 600,000. And then I agree, there are still a couple that we need to work out. I don't know. So basically, ditto to what Kaylee said. But likely the chairlift will be a priority when we can try to wrap our minds around and get an approach on that. Yeah, pretty good.
And the base parking improvement, what is that?
Yeah, so that's one that I am actually not able to necessarily, so I think some of that's gonna have to do with like circulation, and just some like kind of basic, I mean, there's a scale of things. I don't think all the improvements would need to happen at once. But feel free to add.
Yeah, the conceptual master plan said do base parking improvements, but it didn't really say what that is, but and it could be under some obscure heading under in the estimated cost piece. I couldn't tell if we're gonna do any parking improvements up there right away or not.
I think there would be limited parking improvements that would be done initially, but again, that's gonna be outside the scope of the budget for this session. That would come from other sources.
And that's maybe a good point for clarification that the conceptual master plan was really critical for talking about potential for the site and help get to some numbers. But I think that's been whittled down a little bit for the purpose of the open space on funding ask to try to do it as minimal improvements and to save as much money as possible in order to open the site safely for the public. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and knowing that we have these other groups that we're working with who are working on fundraising, this is not the only funding that's coming towards the project. This is the focus of the funding for. I keep pointing up here, the budget.
Yeah. I don't want to hog this, but I literally have 15 questions. I got a boatload of them, but
You have the floor.
So as long as we're talking about budget, you know, and I was looking at what will these things more or less cost? And it looks like maybe 4 or 5 or even 6 FTE, you know, full-time employees to manage this with all the maintenance needs and whatever ongoing other things that are happening and scheduling needs, maybe somewhere down the road. Is there a plan for where that money will come from?
So, good question. I do want to specify though, that like those conversations around how the conceptual master plan could be implemented and the funding and the maintenance, those are really important questions. I will say that they're running parallel to the acquisition question and discussion. So those things we're gonna, probably are gonna try not to dive too deep in to that discussion here. But there will be conversations happening at the Parks and Trails Advisory Board that relate to that, and I'd be happy to, like, you know, those are things that will be followed up on. But I just don't want to get us too off track of like the questions, you know, related to acquiring the property are going to be a little distinct from the questions about management.
Right.
Yeah.
And I understand that. It just, I think it helps clarify the
Yeah.
purchase, you know, is it well
Yeah.
thought out? Can we afford to manage the thing once we
Yeah.
get it?
And that's a good question, and I think maybe understanding the, maybe more backing up about what the conceptual master plan is that it's not a prescription. It's not these are all the things we are gonna do. It is one piece of a larger puzzle that will guide management if it is then acquired by the county and supported with the city. One thing that guides management is money. So what do we have the capacity for? Another is people. What do we have the capacity for? And yeah, while some of that might need to grow, it's again, and there are also regulations and permits and just, there's a whole host of things. And so the master plan is a piece of that, not all of it. And it's not like gonna dictate what has to happen. If that makes sense?
Oh,
So
yeah, I totally
Well,
understand
yeah,
that. It's,
and I think
it's a
that's,
vision.
it's a vision.
Right,
Totally.
yeah.
And it could be implemented over, you know, a period of time.
I appreciate you taking a flexible, long-term look, because we could bankrupt the organization by designing this Cadillac approach that, you know, we couldn't afford.
Charles, you had your hand up there.
Yeah, thanks. So maybe this is a question for you, Eric, as the chair, to just help us focus a little bit on what we should be asking about. Seems to me the main thing that we should be asking questions about is about the acquisition. The $1 million or the $2 million, the million, and where it's gonna go. There's all these other questions, like I also have 10 questions or so about management of the area, but I don't think we have enough information. It hasn't been presented to us about what's the kind of short-term, 2-year, 5-year plan for getting this all done. You've alluded to several processes that are ongoing. I think it would be important for us to know more about that, and maybe this probably isn't the right venue because this hasn't been prepared, or maybe it's just too early to even ask. But that would be important because we're all going to have questions about the management. We don't want to approve money if we're not sure that there's actually capacity to manage this thing the way we think it should be managed. So that's part of the discussion. I'm not sure you're prepared to answer all of our questions right now. So the question to Eric is, what should we do?
I totally agree that, you know, we want to make sure we're spending $2 million of the public's money wisely. And so it's nice to look a little further afield, maybe not to the final end build out of the whole thing 40 years from now.
Right.
I think it's a good question to consider. And I think that, I mean, you kind of said it yourself, like we're looking at the $2 million being spent here on the items that are being presented. Probably Well, it's up to your personal feelings, but these committees are probably not responsible for those kinds of budget decisions. It's certainly, the responsibility of the, city council, commissioners. I think that's probably where more of the decision lies, but it is, I agree, it's hard to split that because it kind of circles back to, spending money wisely. But I think, I think that we should try to focus the ask here.
But could we ask the city and county maybe in the next meeting to provide a little more clarity on some of the management issues?
I think that's an appropriate question.
Okay.
I'm not sure, Pat? Do you have your hand up?
Yes.
Okay.
So I just kind of to follow up on that. One of the many roles that the Open Lands Commission is advising the commissioners on the big picture as it impacts rural residents. And your question goes exactly to that. Would this $2 million be wisely spent here? If in fact you needed to add 6 staff people, or the city needed to raise their fees for those youth camps. So they're very interrelated from the county's side of things. Certainly the ask is specific to the $1 million from the county, should the county spend it or not. Unfortunately, the answer to that is not just yes or no limited to the 1 million. It's how that 1 million impacts taxpayers and users well into the future. And as you said, can we afford it? Sharon said as well. It's definitely something we have to look at more in depth. Don't have to, probably should. Some of us may or may not agree. Back to you, Tom.
I'm gonna go to Lander, because Lander had his hand up, I think, right?
Yes, and this may fall into the management category, not fully, but we've talked about how the county would manage and own this property. What does that mean with support from the city? What does that mean in a legal sense of like,
Yeah.
how does that actually play out?
Yeah, so how that works is where the county would have fee title ownership of the property. And then would be, the primary, that's one of the models that would be that's proposed. And then the county would be the manager of the property. And then what happens when the city and the county work together on something like this is they enter into what's called an interlocal agreement that establishes roles, responsibility, fiscal, pieces. And so that is the mechanism that establishes that. Real quick, while I'm already talking, because it speaks to these discussions around management, maintenance, funding, and I'm not saying that the maintenance and management discussions aren't pertinent to the group, but what I want to clarify is that 2 things. One, remembering that conservation of lands is opportunistic. So there's a moment right now to decide as a community if the land should be acquired. And there's a decision that's going, or an action that will come before the committees. Is this project worthy of open space bond funding? Right? And that's a separate, those are like slightly distinct questions. While they are interrelated, they are slightly distinct. And so I think we do need to remember that as we are looking at the proposal, that it's for site acquisition, and that is a limited time offer in a sense, right? It doesn't, you do it or you don't, and when you lose the opportunity, the management questions are kind of null at that point. So I think it's really important to remember that. The other piece is that while the management questions, again, they're pertinent, it's important to remember the question before the committee being around the open space bond funding, and that once that recommendation is made, there also will be, as I mentioned, these continuing conversations over the summer and fall relating to management and maintenance. And those conversations will also be happening through advisory committees, like the Parks and Trails Board, which are open to the public. There'll be opportunities to engage Missoula County Voice, to engage in that conversation as well. I just want to make it clear that this isn't the only venue for that, and you can make their voice heard too on those items as they're progressing. Jennifer, if you have any clarification there, you can definitely add it.
No, I mean, once again, Haley is just doing. Haley gives much, she always covers everything, but I just want to really make sure that you all, again, know me, Jennifer Davis, manager of Parks and Recreation. And I do play a large role in overseeing the Missoula County Parks and Trails Advisory Board, which is not unlike the city parks and what do you all call it? The park board. Park board. And without a doubt, so this new model that we're proposing to have county ownership has really only arisen in the last couple of months. And so as Kaylee was saying, a lot of this is opportunistic, is we're doing the work right now. And I would love to actually be able to give you all the information at this moment. And by us saying we don't have it right now does not mean to indicate we are not working really hard at it or that we don't have competent staff putting this all together. We just need to kind of get it done. And so we have a whole list of things that we plan to do over the next handful of months. Bring them to the advisory board and bring them to the county commissioners for consideration. And the operation and the O&M basically of this site are going to be critical components that we look at. I would just emphasize too that that you can certainly look to the work that the city and the county have done in the past as an indication of how we will do our work at Marshall Mountain. If you trust us and you see the work that we do, it will be much like you've seen in the past. So we do have professional level folks, of depth of collegial experience between the two partners. And so I do have confidence that we will be able to soundly manage the properties where they to come our way, and if the commissioner with the council provides so.
Yeah, can I add one quick thing? Morgan Valiant, with Missoula Parks and Rec, my crews have been managing the site for the last couple of years. And I think one thing that's important to recognize is we don't often have an opportunity to both look at a management model and a development master plan and an acquisition at the same time. I've never seen that personally. What budget you're seeing right now shows is basically acquiring the property and getting it up to standard to meet public uses that are occurring right now. And right now, it's maybe 3/4 time FTE plus strong partnerships with community members to manage the site. And that's where we're at right now. And so I think it's really important to recognize that the budget that you're looking at, although we're trying to separate acquisition from maintenance, really gets us to where we are today.
Thanks. So I hope I answered your question, and then I tried to provide some more context.
One quick follow-up,
Yeah.
actually. Are there any other models that are like that out there as examples of what that's played out?
That's a good question, and
For it, between the city.
three county partnerships on.
So there's Fort Missoula Regional Park, I think is a really good one. The county does on my end, and we've got an interlocal city management. There's multiple, and there's some of that in the master plan. Other communities that have done very similar projects before, where you've got a mix between city, county, cities, federal, state, private non-partners, friends groups to come in and bring management resources to a valuable community resource. And so these are all formulas, again, that we're developing and working on. I do not think we will have that formula. I guarantee we will not have that formula worked out by the time we as a community have to decide whether or not we're even going to acquire them. But there's a lot of possibilities.
I think Natalie had her hand up next online there. Can you hear us, Natalie?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Do you want me to turn the volume up?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm terribly sorry I was a few minutes late. My name's Natalie Sullivan, and I'm one of the newer members of the Open Lands Committee Board. Very new to this board, but not new to boards in general. I just wanted to congratulate the managers who have put this plan together thus far. I think it's been very well done, very well laid out. I appreciate the simplicity of the budget of the acquisition part. And honestly, I think I think you've done a great job of making it a very affordable acquisition considering the space and the amount of work that has to be done. Land in Montana is very expensive, and this seems like a very, very affordable acquisition. So good job. No questions.
Thanks, Natalie. I've got you, Ed, but I'm gonna go to Mark real quick.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, two things. One, I think that it cannot be overemphasized the point. Several of my questions were just answered by Callie and Juniper. So I'll shorten one to a statement. I don't think we can underestimate the value of the opportunistic acquisition feature of this. This is an incredible deal if we weren't doing anything other than just buying land. So the rest, I'm sure, will come out in the wash with the modeling of how it's going to be staffed. I was wondering from Juniper's standpoint if there was any modeling being done, and I think someone else who spoke after Juniper mentioned or brought this up, that behind the scenes there is modeling, and it doesn't seem to me that the number of FTEs that are going to be required to manage this is going to be something that's not doable. So I think I can be plenty patient to wait for that information, and I don't think that's what we're talking about right now. We're talking about acquisition. Secondly, I looked at the maps carefully, and are there any existing trails between the trails in this acquisition, 480 acres, and I live over on the Woods Gulch side? Are there any existing trails that connect those two areas? Yes. Or does FWP or others plan to build those trails?
Yeah, so might have somebody else answer this question. I think there's that Forest Service road that continues on from the county road that doglegs onto the Conservation Fund property and snakes its way up to the Woods Gulch side. I also want to call out that the city owns land down the road, down Marshall Canyon, and there's that cutoff road that gets you to the backside of Mount Jumbo. It doesn't connect to the property exactly, but there's that. Are those the two primary connections?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, there are two primary connections that are largely tied into existing old Forest Service roads that may or may not be within their trails inventory. We are in our partnership discussions. The Forest Service is a very strong partner and very interested in talking about future connections and how we can improve them back over to Woods, over to the Blackfoot, into other areas. If we decide to acquire the property.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Are those Forest Service roads open? They're closed, aren't they? That's right.
It depends. We're back there. There's some that are open, some that are closed. There's some that are, in their roads layer and but not maintained.
I mean, I've hiked from Lincoln Saddle Trailhead to Marshall over the top through this gulch. You can do that. With some ingenuity.
There's a couple trails that are within spitting distance of road networks that get you to the Blackfoot River. So there's a lot of potential, but.
Did you have a couple other questions, Ed?
Yeah, just to, I really would second what Morgan has said. This is unusual in that we are not only looking at the acquisition, we're looking further into management, which is usually the purview of what's the subcommittee under Parks and Boards?
Well, within the city, when we decide to acquire land and manage it, as city conservation lands, our conservation lands advisory committee then usually spends a couple of years developing a management plan of our trails and things.
So I assume, presuming we approve this, that the Conservation Lands Advisory Committee will work closely with the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee on the county side to craft joint. What? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, no.
We do imagine absolutely that we would need a management plan, so I would want to draw distinction between the conceptual master plan as being a vision for potential improvements on the property. Very separate would be the need for a management plan, and we would be working on that fairly immediately. Were we to acquire the property, it would be probably our top priority, along with just getting basic staff to make sure we do a management plan and then implement it. And that would be a responsibility of the county.
So the conservation,
yeah.
city's conservation land,
Right.
would be pretty much.
Correct.
Or-
That being said, we're a public entity and we will be reaching out with our robust partners to make sure, and our other stakeholders and the community at large to have their voices heard in the development of the management. So we would not be doing it in any kind of isolated bubble, but it would be the county in a role and
The
our.
county has their own responsibility, the county parks and advisory group will do that, and not the city's conservation. Land.
Pat, so I got you wrong. Pat, did you have a question?
Two. The first, I want to make sure that no one misunderstands the questions about future management. It has nothing to do with the incredible talents that our staff has. That's a given. The question is, can the county afford to tax residents to pay for management of a site like this, if it indeed is required? This goes back pre-Morgan, when the city was looking at Mount Jumbo. And the then director of the Parks Department testified that there would be no management cost because it was just open space. And I think we all learned a lesson that that's not the case. So I think the question is not necessarily to staff, can you manage this? The question would be to the council and the commissioners, will you adequately fund this if we suggest that you buy it? So just want to make sure that's quite clear. And then the second issue is, it would be incredibly helpful to me as a member of this committee, if there were something in writing from the tribes. And I know you've met with them. I know there's conversations ongoing. To have something from the tribes that says, yes, please do this, would be incredibly helpful. Just a request, if you're fulfilled.
The meeting happened, and so there is, I mean, not that it's letter, there's a recorded meeting that we could share with people that tracked with that conversation between tribal council and the county commissioners, but there's not been like a letter from the tribal council expressing exactly what they discussed. So we can definitely look into that.
Would be incredibly beneficial.
Since open space bond funds are going to be used, how do we know it's gonna remain open space? How do we know the county's not gonna go out there 10 years from now and build a 5-acre warehouse out there?
Yep, it's a great question. So as you may remember from the 2018 open space bond, anytime bond funding is used to purchase a property that will be accessible to the public, it has to have an open space designation. And so that's one kind of layer. But then remember too, that we had all of those additional funding sources we were looking to help acquire the property. And so any funding source is always going to require, let's say, a deed restriction or a funding agreement. When you get that funding, you're making a promise as well to that organization, saying, we will manage it like this in perpetuity. It will be open space, conservation land in perpetuity. So funding agreements help boost that, but there would absolutely also be these other restrictions that are imposed because of the open space bond.
Thanks.
Yeah, and then there's also other mechanisms that the.
Natalie, do you have your hand up or is that a leftover?
That's a leftover, sorry.
All right, Kit.
Just a question about the purchase price, and the 3 individual property prices. So I'm correct in saying Missoula city and or county does not have to pay fair market value property.
So one thing I just always want to call out, because it's really important, per statute, city and county cannot ever pay over appraised value for any properties. That's that. 2 of the properties, because of the generosity of the landowners, they have offered to sell at a bargain sale, which is below market value. And then the other property, the conservation fund, they just purchased that in April. And so they are, the price we have discussed, it's just getting their, getting what they paid for it back.
Can you, for each of those 3 properties, can you just sort of walk through how the purchase prices were determined?
Yeah, so for the conservation fund property, that one's the easiest because it was just sold recently. And so they have their cost, their appraised cost from that, which I assume is translated for them into their request of how much they would like to get the property for. And then for the other 2, you know, I will just say, speaking maybe a little bit on behalf of Izzy Dog and Five Valleys, that they paid, you know, they got to that price of what they feel like they are gonna want compensation for. And then anything above that is going to be in-kind contributions. Does that make sense? So like, they have they have figured out what they wanted to offer it for. Is that enough detail? Okay.
So to clarify, first, the total purchase price is 2.4, right?
Yeah.
The land, but it's valued at 800,000 more than that? Oh,
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more than, I think it's like 800 and what was it? I'll put like a budget table.
Without the official appraisal.
Yes, and that is what I definitely want to make clear, that in-kind contribution is estimated at 875,000. It's based on estimated value, so final appraisals would decide the actual in-kind contribution, but the purchase price is an agreed upon price.
Did the conservation fund 160, did that just come into play, you know, after, obviously they bought it, but was it in play prior to that, or people were like drooling over it, but it wasn't possible, or?
Yeah, you know, that was one that I'm sure, you know, as people looked at those 2 parcels, the Five Valleys, the Izzy Dog parcel, sure, a lot of people like, oh, God, it'd be really cool if we could add that 3rd one. And yeah, like opportunistically, it was able to happen, that the conservation fund was able to step in and negotiate with the family that owned it prior, and yeah, make that happen. So that just came online, it was purchased in, I want to say early April of 2023, and they've been in negotiations for a little while, and yes, it's very recent. Oh, yeah, Ben.
And on that, Five Valleys, I can speak to the way that we came up with that price, is that the land value is limited. Over the last 9 years, we've incurred some carrying and maintenance costs. We've done extensive weed management annually up there. And so what we see is actually a full donation of the land value with the duration of a small carrying costs originally.
Thank you. To clarify that.
It looks like Rob online has his hand up. For LLC, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Kaylee, Rob here. Hey, I got a question for you. So in the demolition part of it, the trails update, parking update, all that, the fees and amounts, is the county performing the work, or are they I guess contracting it out? I guess I missed if there was some clarification there.
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. I don't think that's been totally decided. It would probably be a combination. And I'm sure there'll be, you know, help from other entities as well. But yeah, it would probably be through a combination of staff and contracted services.
Okay.
Lots of contracted services. Some of those things like you know, deconstructing a building, taking down chairlifts, whatnot, are pretty specialized.
Okay.
So I've noticed also that throughout some of the reading discussions, I guess, is the site will be open for people riding horseback, which is nice. But will there be designated trails that mountain bikes won't be on for horseback riders? Because that doesn't necessarily end up real well. And will there be a good turnaround or parking for people with horse trailers?
Yeah, I think that what is of most interest to the horseback riding crew is more the connection on those Forest Service lands, which is pretty distinct from where a lot of the mountain biking trails are. Yeah, I mean, you know, just like any other use, if we're going to accommodate something like that, where the appropriate infrastructure is required.
Anybody else on the committees have questions? Okay, I will, one last call. Nobody? Okay, I'm gonna open it up to the public. Does anybody in the room, in the public, have questions?
Yeah, I'm Ken Brown. I live at the base of Mount Jumbo, so if you look at the L, there's a ravine that drops down right in my backyard. We have the, trail goes through there. It's great. We've been there since 1979. I certainly encourage all that use, and I think it's a great use of public land, and we got the paragliders, and it's great to see all that. I am concerned about, as Pat said, when you purchase open land, what's the infrastructure? So on Mount Jumbo there, I'm not saying it's a problem because I think people are using the hill, but there are no restroom facilities there. There's limited garbage collection, but Lincoln Hills in particular is a problem. I think it's extremely dangerous. You get cars that are going for quarter, half mile that are on both sides of the road. And you got kids, you got dogs, and you got cars that they can't pass each other. So one's happened to back up. They just put in garbage, a couple garbage cans. There are no restroom facilities. I'm up there 4 times a day, rotating horses in pasture. There's people that are using the restroom right on the road, and that's just really inappropriate. So the infrastructure is really necessary. That parking, it has to change. Somebody's going to get hurt. And when you're looking at Marshall Mountain, there's also the issues. They've done some road construction in there. They've upgraded the road, and of course, there's more that will need to be done. But then through the winter or whatever, you're going to have to plow that. But that parking lot is a concern, and for a horse use, which I don't imagine personally there'll be a great amount. I ride there quite a bit from a different part of the mountain. But you have to have pull-through parking. Backup with horse trailers is not good, and some of us are not good at doing it. So not a good combination. So that's a concern. The trails, as I understand, there are some trails that are being designed that are for horse and hiker use, but directional, oppositional use by mountain bikes. So in other words, when horses are coming down, mountain bikes are going up, and I think that's a good plan. Now, how much is it gonna get used? I don't know. And what's the connection to other areas? I don't see people really doing it as a designation, like the Rattlesnake or Blue Mountain. Those are designation, and they have their own trailheads. But I do have concerns about the maintenance that, staff that you're gonna have. So as we say, with horses, there's the price of the horse, and then there's the price of the horse. So A horse these days are probably going anywhere from $7,000 to $20,000. But you have a truck that's 60 to 100,000. You have to have a vet check once a year, so it's probably $400. And hay is going for 240 a ton. So anyway, all those things add up. And unless you can take care of all of those, you do not have the safety concerns of that animal. And quite honestly, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it, and you shouldn't have a horse. So the bottom line is, if you're gonna have this open space, have the infrastructure that supports it. It's gotta be a critical component. If you don't have it, I don't think you can afford it.
Thanks, Ken.
Everybody, I'm Jeff Crouch with the Friends of Marshall Mountain. I just wanted to say, first and foremost, thank you to all of you for sitting on a citizens volunteer board. It's incredible that you dedicate your time to this, and thanks for your time tonight. And to staff at county and city, who we've been working with for well over a year now, hats off to all of the effort and the countless hours you guys are putting in. I'll save comments and details for next month's meeting. I just want to say that I think all of us are probably in this room because we care deeply about this place we live in, and we care deeply about preserving experiences in the outdoors. For me, it's a life-changing thing to get outside. And I bet a lot of you feel the same way. And the reason I'm involved with John and our other co-chairs and this whole effort is because we almost lost Marshall. After lots of years of being lackadaisical about kind of using it for free. And I personally decided I was gonna help make sure that doesn't happen and that we get this done. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for your time. I'm gonna say.
Hi, everybody. I'm John O'Connor. I'm here with, I'm also a member of the Missoula Parks Board. I'm a member of the Missoula. I'm also on the Conservation Lands Advisory Committee, so I've had a little over a decade of experiencing kind of all aspects of how projects work. I cut my teeth on the Fort Missoula Regional Park project, and Pat helped me a lot on that. I've seen the city and the county partner before on really important pieces to our community. And I would just toss out there that I'll get into my next month as well, but I consider this to be one of the projects as well. That's why I chose to get involved and try to. I completely understand and appreciate the concerns that have been brought up about how do you pay for the future, how do you maintain it? And I also appreciate that there are a lot of people who think about those things and present solutions to our governing bodies to implement. We mentioned on the city side, the development of master plans. So you have conceptual plans for something that might be. It goes through a process where you develop a master plan, but it will be. And the people who develop those master, make those recommendations, have to take in the considerations of what everybody wants versus, plainly speaking, what everybody might be able to afford or what we can realistically do. And that process comes in the future. I think it's something we definitely need to be concerned about. But in terms of the acquisition, even if this property was just acquired or left as is with the improvements of the public. You win. Thank you.
I'm Steve Gaskill, and I represent Nordic skiers. I'm also a mountain biker, also a backcountry skier, anything that's cycling sport. My kids grew up at Marshall Mountain skiing, wonderful place. And all I can say is that, well, I was an Olympic ski coach, and being able to take youth out there rather than depend on golf course or paddock. Another youth program of about 100. We're limited to 6 kids at Patty Canyon. We can't take any more than some course of the schools. They have a park that provides snow. Be unbelievable for youth sports here, summer and winter. I've been up there with the mountain bike kids when they're there. I've been up there in the winter with youth cross-country skiers just knocking around. This is an opportunity that I think you just can't pass up. I'm all. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Brian Williams, trail builder with Mountain Bike Missoula. Been personally involved in building things in Marshall Mountain since about 2010. So long history. It's really amazing to see this project at this stage. I also agree that it's an amazing opportunity. I just wanted to say that I'm really impressed with the conceptual master plan. I think the level of detail is very thorough. So, and I think that looking into that might also address some of those questions about infrastructure and, you know, pass-through parking and things like that. I would encourage everyone to spend, if you haven't spent some time with it, I'm really impressed with the work that the city and county have put into that over the last year. I know it's been a huge blessing. So I'm also just very supportive of the project and appreciating your time on this. So thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Anybody online? I don't see any hands raised. All right. Good discussion. Questions? Thanks, everyone.
Oh, I do have a question.
Sure.
Hey, Kaylee?
Yeah.
Since this is a purchase instead of a conservation easement, are we still gonna need to do the level 2 evaluation and come up with the ranking number and all that stuff for this?
I was gonna ask that same question.
So if it's okay, I might just go ahead and move into a few of the next steps and kind of, go with under staff announcements and whatnot. So I think one thing, site visit that we want you to talk about. So yes, we still do an evaluation, Open Lands Committee and Open Space Advisory Committee members, yeah, we'll still be sent the evaluation form that happens for every bond project, whether it's easement or the title acquisition, no matter who the sponsor is. And typically how we ask that is structured is that we send out the evaluation, we'll send out the form that goes along with it that gives you more guidance, and then ask that you fill those out and return them back to staff before the next meeting. So the next meeting, as everybody knows, will be July 13th, 5 o'clock here. again, and that's when the action will be, scheduled. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is the site visit. So we are planning on doing a joint site visit with OLC and OSAC. We have, as you know, we have it between this meeting and the next meeting. And for early July, that gets into the July 4th kind of holiday time. So we would like to avoid that. Looking at calendars and trying to figure out kind of availability, I think it's looking like July 29th would be our preferred date to have members out there, as long as that works for a good number of you.
June 20.
Oh my gosh, thank you. June 29th. And we were thinking that would probably happen a little later in the day, depending on people's availability, to maybe try to have it around 4 and structure that so everybody could, who was able to attend could be there at 4, and if people needed to leave early, that'd be fine, but there could be some opportunities if people wanted to stay, you know, maybe more than like an hour where we could take a few little hikes, to see more of the property. So June 29th, does that work for many of you? Maybe just like raise your hand if that sounds good.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so unless,
Well,
awesome, we'll go with it. So June 29th, we'll send out a calendar reminder. I'll send out,
4 o'clock?
4 o'clock.
does 4 o'clock work for everybody? Is that a convenient time, or does it need to be?
Is it gonna be hot?
I'll tell you, the weather's gonna be
Rather
perfect.
rain.
70 and sunny.
No snow.
No smoke, no rain. Okay, let's plan on that, 4 o'clock on the 29th. Send out reminders. I think that's all. Yeah, what did I miss?
Can I just ask, maybe we could ask you if you all have any preferences on what you'd like to see and do during that site visit, just to help us kind of plan something that's gonna be effective for you all.
I think, sorry.
I'd like to see that owl.
Oh, owl. You and me both, Mac. I want to see a flame-muted owl. They look really cute.
For example, are you interested in mostly concentrating kind of in the base area where it's easy to access? Or are you interested in kind of going back on some trails? Maybe a little bit of both, some options for everybody.
You can drive from the Green Gate up above there, but you go high to see the upper part.
We could look into that. There should be, and Five Valleys has administrative access.
We can drive from the base area up to the top of the lift.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, so we'll reach out about logistics. We will probably try to coordinate too. Everybody can get there. Obviously, there's plenty of parking, and then maybe we can just like consolidate vehicles as we move around the site. So that would be great. And we'll reach out to some partners, try to see if the Forest Service can do it too.
If there's a way to see at least a component of each 3 properties.
Right.
Yeah, I think the conservation fund piece will probably be the hardest. We can definitely walk on that road and get to like that where it connects back, but I don't know how much we can go back in the drainage. That being so, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been kind of curious about that red Prairie area and where it goes.
Yeah, so we will try to see as much as we can. And also, I just want to call out for those of you who aren't able to make the site visit, remember that site is open to the public. Less so on the conservation fund piece. That's not necessarily like as open, but the Five Valleys and Izzy Dog properties, like feel free to go up and check it out if it's make it to the site visit.
It's a little bit beyond our purview because we didn't hand this off to others, but some discussion of the infrastructure and what the plans are and how that's going to unfold.
The letter from the commissioners saying they will fund it. Blank check.
Say that again, Pat?
Link check. There go your taxes.
Great. Are we through the end of that agenda item?
Yeah, I think so. That's it.
Okay. We did have staff communications, general communications.
Oh,
Is there
yeah.
anything-
That was my
Under that?
staff communication.
Okay.
Staff communications.
You could pass.
Okay. So, next is the site visit and then July 13th, back here.
Yep.
Okay.
there will actually be votes on July 13th.
Yes, that there will be an action item on the agenda for a vote on the recommendation for OSAC to the city council for OLC.
Then you want, by July 4th, you want the evaluations back to you?
It would be best if we can get those evaluations sent to us, just, a couple days prior.
The county has to go through those evaluations. Do we have to turn our evaluations? Or do we just do them for ourselves?
We've been talking about this at length a little bit, and I, from what, you want me to be careful, don't you? From what we've seen and what we talked about in OSAC meetings in the past, those are not a required element of your decision. You can make a decision without that, but they're there as a tool for you to use. So the reason we say that is because they're kind of an internal decision-making tool for you all, but they don't need to be shared with anybody necessarily. But your discussions and your decisions do need to be obviously publicly available, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
But the county has different.
Yeah, we used to, always have OLC members send staff the evaluation that they filled out because it was a numeric scoring. And then we wouldn't just share it with everybody. We would summarize everything and share that back. But now that I'm saying that, I kind of feel like the new evaluation, right, scoring, it's not, I think it's number scores, is it? Like you circle high, low, medium. It's like strong. Yeah, so in that case, we can't really be summarized in the same way. So maybe I just encourage you to fill out the nomination because it'll help you evaluate the project in a positive fashion.
But on the other hand, it would give you an idea if everybody said medium or a third of the people said high and a third said low.
I listen, you don't have to send them in, but we are allowed to send them in.
Why would you want to?
I don't know why I want to, but I just want to know what the ground rules are. So.
Eric, do you have any other, you look like you were gonna say something, Eric? No, I didn't. I guess I was a little surprised of the request to turn it in.
You're surprised.
I'm same minded, and I'm gonna fill it out. I may or may not turn it in. Yeah, nothing in the bylaws or the interlocal agreement or city ordinances require you to use that. That was a tool that was created for you to help you make decisions, logical decisions, and to help weigh those conservation values of every property. But you do not have to do it.
Yeah, and as one who worked with your predecessor on developing these tools, it did seem at that point like it was going to be more of an integral, formalized part of the approval process. But it sounds like some clarification has occurred.
I think what we wanted to, our previous discussion was that we wanted to make sure we had a period that was dedicated to doing them, if you wanted to do them. That was the discussion. I don't think we talked about.
It was a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
So from the county's perspective, I don't think this project is the time we should change our procedures. So let's go ahead and fill out our forms and send them in to staff and they can summarize it. We just don't need any glitches in our side of the process. So we'll go ahead and fill them out.
Between city and county, that's totally acceptable.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're making separate decisions as
Yep.
separate bodies.
Good, thanks.
I have one question from both. Yeah, a public question, because I don't know about this. Not that this would happen, but if it did happen, if each side decides to recommend to their governing bodies more than what is being asked, could they do that?
Yeah, so that's a great question and always something I like to clarify that I didn't, which I probably would have done the next meeting anyway, but it is just a recommendation from OLC and OSAC. So if each or one body, voted no, voted yes, voted more, that recommendation would get passed, which you're able to do. You're able to make recommendations with conditions, things like that. And then those would go on to your respective governing bodies who would then make the decision, to agree or disagree or qualify change. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
We have unlimited powers of advice.
Right. Great. I think I feel pretty clear about next steps.
Yeah.
So, I don't, does OLC,
We have one more item.
do we have one more on?
OLC.
Okay,
If there are any general communications from OLC members, we always provide an opportunity for that at the end of the meeting. It's not required, but if anybody has anything for the good of the order that they would like to share, let's start with the online folks. Mark, anything?
Just that there's been a neighborhood meeting in the Rattlesnake to talk about fire danger and the bug infestation there. So I don't know, there's been members of the county and a group of people. I obviously couldn't go because I'm not there, but my brother went, and I think it was either last night or Tuesday night. And so I'll get more information about that when I get home next week.
Great, thanks, Mark. Rob?
Yep.
No, nothing here really. Same thing, just growing alfalfa here in cows, so.
Good. Please keep doing that. Natalie?
No, I'm good. It's interesting to hear what everybody's concerns are about the acquisition, but looking forward to next meeting.
Great, thank you. Sharon?
All's good out in the 9 Mile. Finally got a little bit of rain. It's been so dry. It's incredible. But, and for me personally, I've been involved up to my eyeballs, it seems, in forest plan revision for the Lolo. So it's been interesting in trying to help massage the Lolo or help it move along for the next 4 or 5 years, however long it's gonna take.
Awesome. Bruce?
I was just thinking, if I can't make the tour of Marshall, I just toured it on Friday when I rode mountain bike race to the top, which I regret doing. It was too hot. Anyway, so I may not make that.
Ron? Pass. Have I missed anyone online?
Corey.
Corey? Are you? Anything you'd like to share?
No, I'm the same as Natalie. I just got onboarded over the last month, so this is my first meeting, and pretty cool to come in right in the middle of this big acquisition project. So thanks for having me, and appreciate it. Nothing else to add.
Way to jump into the fire.
Yeah, thanks for volunteering.
all right. Thanks, everyone, for your time, and we're getting almost kind of on the vision time, so looking forward to some additional discussion with the group next meeting. And I think we will need to keep it probably even more formal the next meeting. I think I'm envisioning maybe some more comments, but that's what the whole meeting is for comments. So looking forward to it, and I will adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Better.